Commander Nadia Volkov stood at the observation deck of the TDF Intrepid, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she watched the approaching alien vessel. The ship's sleek, crystalline structure seemed to ripple against the backdrop of Earth's atmosphere, defying every principle of aerodynamics she'd learned in her 20 years of service. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the tension crackling through the bridge. Lieutenant Reg Patel's fingers danced across his holographic interface. Zinthar vessel maintaining approach vector. Their shields are active but weapons systems appear dormant. They're following the approach protocol exactly as agreed. Nadia nodded, though her jaw remained tight. The Zinthar had appeared 3 weeks ago, their massive fleet materializing at the edge of the solar system. Their request for diplomatic contact had been unexpected, but their patience in following Earth's cautionary protocols had been impeccable. Almost too perfect. "What's your assessment, Harrison?" she asked her XO, who stood analyzing sensor data with his cybernetic eye. Commander James Harrison scratched his silver-streaked beard. "They're being careful. Too careful. Like they're afraid of spooking us. Whatever they want, it's important enough to play by our rules completely." The Zinthar ship, now close enough to fill half the viewport, began its final approach sequence. Its crystalline surface shifted colors, from deep purple to a soft blue, their species' traditional signal of peaceful intent. Docking protocol initiated, Rage announced. They're requesting permission to extend their boarding tunnel. Nadia took a deep breath. Granted. Alert the diplomatic team and security detail. Full scan of everything that comes through that tunnel. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of procedure and protocol. When the Zinthar delegation finally emerged onto the Intrepid, Nadia found herself face to face with beings that challenged her every conception of alien life. The Zinthar stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies composed of what appeared to be living crystal and light. They moved with liquid grace, their translucent forms pulsing with patterns of bioluminescence that seemed to form words and concepts in the air around them. The lead diplomat, who had introduced itself as resonant of distant waves, addressed Nadia directly. Its voice emerged as a harmonic blend of tones that the ship's translation systems rendered into crisp English. "Commander Volkov, we appreciate your accommodation of our arrival. Time, we fear, is of greater essence than we initially conveyed." Nadia's eyes narrowed. "I thought this was a diplomatic contact mission." "It is," Resonant replied, its crystalline form shifting to a deeper hue. "But diplomacy is often driven by necessity. We require humanity's assistance. More specifically, we require your species' unique deficiency." The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. Deficiency. Nadia's voice carried a warning edge. Perhaps my translation is imperfect. Resonant's colors swirled apologetically. What we consider a deficiency has proven to be humanity's greatest strength. Your species lacks the natural inhibitions that govern most sentient races. You defy what others accept as impossible. You challenge fundamental constants that other species consider immutable. Harrison stepped forward. "You're saying we're too stubborn to know when to quit." "We're saying," another Zinthar delegate chimed in, its voice like wind through crystal, "that humanity's refusal to accept limitations may be the only thing that saves this galaxy from extinction." Nadia's hand unconsciously moved to the rifle at her hip. "Explain." What followed was a briefing that made her wish for the relative simplicity of first contact protocols. The Zinthar spoke of a cosmic horror approaching from the galactic core, a vast, ancient intelligence that devoured civilizations. Traditional weapons and tactics had proven useless. Countless species had fallen trying to fight it conventionally. "We have observed your species," Resonant continued. "Your wars, your conflicts, your endless drive to push boundaries. Where others see impossibility, humans see challenges to overcome. We need that perspective. That madness." "So," Nadia said slowly, "you crossed half the galaxy to ask humans to think outside the box for you?" "No, Commander." Resonant's form pulsed with urgent patterns. "We crossed half the galaxy to prevent your species from being devoured like all the others. But in doing so, we hope to learn from you, to understand how you break rules that we thought unbreakable." Nadia exchanged glances with Harrison. They both recognized the weight of the moment. Humanity's first contact with alien life was driven not by peaceful exploration, but by desperate need. "And if we refuse?" Harrison asked. Resonant's crystalline form darkened. "Then you face it alone when it arrives. We estimate you have less than 1 Earth year before it reaches your sector of space." Nadia straightened her uniform and squared her shoulders. "Well then, Resonant of distant waves, I suggest we stop wasting time. Tell us everything you know about this threat, and we'll show you exactly why humanity's so-called deficiencies might be exactly what this galaxy needs." As the briefing began in earnest, Nadia couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger challenge. The real test wouldn't be facing some cosmic horror. It would be convincing these advanced aliens to abandon their rigid thinking and embrace humanity's chaos. The stars seemed to shine a little dimmer through the viewport, as if they too sensed the growing shadow approaching from the galactic core. But where others saw doom, Nadia saw opportunity. After all, humanity had spent its entire existence defying the impossible. "Why stop?" No, the training chamber aboard the TDF Intrepid hummed with barely contained energy as Nadia watched the joint exercise unfold. Below, through reinforced observation windows, human marines and Zinthar warriors attempted to coordinate their movements through a complex combat simulation. The results were less than impressive. "No, no, no," Sergeant Isabella Torres shouted, her voice carrying through the chamber's comm system. "You can't just phase through the barricade. The enemy we're fighting won't conveniently have gaps in their defenses." The Zinthar warrior, designated Swift Strike Through Shadow, reformed its crystalline body into a more solid state. "Your physical limitations should not restrict tactical options. Our natural abilities are exactly why you keep failing." Isabella interrupted, running a hand through her close-cropped hair in frustration. "You're so used to relying on your advanced capabilities that you've forgotten how to think tactically. The Void Hunger doesn't care about your fancy phase shifting. We need to train for worst-case scenarios." Nadia smiled slightly. In the 3 weeks since the alliance had been formalized, this scene had played out countless times. The Zinthar's superior technology and natural abilities had made them overconfident. They'd never had to develop the kind of adaptive, resourceful thinking that humans had forged through millennia of warfare and survival. Harrison appeared at her side, offering a tablet displaying the latest simulation results. "Interesting patterns emerging," he said. "When forced to operate under human limitations, the Zinthar's performance drops by 70%. But when our Marines adapt their tactics to incorporate Zinthar abilities, overall effectiveness increases by 200%. They need to learn from each other," Nadia mused. "We need their capabilities, they need our creativity. The question is whether we can make it click before." An alarm blared through the ship, cutting her off. Lieutenant Petel's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander, to the bridge. We're receiving an emergency transmission from the Zinthar fleet." Nadia and Harrison rushed to the bridge, arriving just as Resonant of Distant Waves materialized through a wall. The crystalline being's usual smooth movements were jagged with urgency. "The void hunger has accelerated its advance," Resonant announced without preamble. "It's already consumed the Helios cluster. 3 billion lives, gone in minutes." Nadia felt her blood run cold. "That's 6 months ahead of your projections." "How?" "It's learning. Another Zinthar, keeper of ancient knowledge, emerged from the shadows. Adapting. Every civilization it consumes adds to its intelligence. We've never seen it move this fast before." Harrison pulled up the strategic display, showing the Void Hunger's progress. "At this rate, it'll reach Earth in 2 months. Resonant finished. "We are not ready. The joint training isn't working fast enough." Nadia completed the thought. She studied the tactical display, her mind racing. "We're approaching this wrong. We've been trying to make our forces fight the same way, but that's not what we need." She turned to Resonant. "Your people have spent millennia perfecting your natural abilities, becoming the ultimate expression of what you are. We humans. We've spent our history overcoming what we're not. We need to stop trying to homogenize our forces and start leveraging our differences." "Explain," Keeper requested, its crystalline form shifting with interest. Nadia gestured to the training chamber below. "Look at Torres down there. She's not frustrated because the Zinthar can't fight like humans. She's frustrated because they're not fighting like themselves while thinking like humans." She tapped the display, highlighting the Void Hunger's pattern of advance. "This thing adapts to whatever it faces, right? So let's give it something it can't adapt to: organized chaos, unpredictable patterns within patterns. Zinthar precision guided by human improvisation." Harrison caught on. "A symphony of order and chaos." "Exactly." Nadia smiled grimly. "But first, we need a real test. Something to prove this concept can work." She turned to Resonant. "The Void Hunger's advance fleet is hitting the Proxima colony in 3 days. I propose we meet them there." "That's madness." Keeper's form flickered with alarm. "Our forces are nowhere near ready for direct engagement." "Exactly." Nadia's smile turned predatory. "They'll never expect it. And sometimes the best way to learn to swim is to be thrown into the deep end." The Zinthar delegates conferred in rapid pulses of light and color. Finally, Resonant turned back to Nadia. "The human phrase crazy enough to work comes to mind. But the risk is necessary," Nadia finished. "We can spend months training in simulations, or we can learn by doing. And time isn't something we have anymore." She opened a ship-wide channel. "All personnel, this is Commander Volkov. Prepare for emergency jump to Proxima Colony. Combat teams to Briefing Room 1. We're about to put our training to the test." As the ship burst into activity, Harrison leaned close. "You know this could go spectacularly wrong." "Everything we do from here on out could go spectacularly wrong," Nadia replied. "But that's humanity's specialty, isn't it? Making the impossible possible by being too stubborn to accept failure." The stars outside the viewport stretched and blurred as the Intrepid prepared for jump. Somewhere out there, an ancient horror was consuming worlds. But it had never faced anything like this before, an alliance forged between perfect order and beautiful chaos. The real question was whether that alliance would survive its first real test. The Proxima colony hung in space like a shattered jewel. Its orbital platforms were already showing signs of the Void Hunger's advance forces, strange, shadowy tendrils that seemed to absorb both matter and light. Nadia watched from the Intrepid's bridge as the combined human Zinthar fleet moved into position. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the tension coursing through her body. Colony evacuation is 87% complete, Lieutenant Petel reported. Void hunger forces are concentrating on the outer defense platforms. They're consuming them, converting the mass into more of themselves. Isabella Torres, now serving as ground force coordinator, spoke up from her station. Joint strike teams are in position. The Zinthar are, well, they're nervous, Commander. This goes against everything they've ever learned about tactical engagement. Good, Nadia replied, earning surprised looks from both her crew and the Zinthar present on the bridge. The enemy adapts to what it expects. Right now, it expects either a Zinthar response or a human response. It's about to get both and neither. She opened a channel to the fleet. All units, this is Commander Volkov. Execute Operation Chaos Dance. The battle that followed would later be described in a dozen different ways, none of them quite capturing the beautiful insanity of what unfolded. Human ships, their hulls reinforced with Zinthar crystal technology, deliberately flew into the Void Hunger's tendrils, only to have their crews phase shift through the enemy's mass, leaving behind antimatter charges that the Void Hunger's adaptive shields couldn't recognize as weapons until it was too late. Zinthar warriors, guided by human tactical advisors, abandoned their usual precise formation attacks in favor of seemingly random patterns that nonetheless formed a complex, deadly dance. Where the Void Hunger attempted to predict and counter their movements, it found only chaos. They're falling back, Harrison announced, his cybernetic eye tracking multiple battle zones simultaneously. The outer platforms are clear. But Nadia saw the trap forming. All units, scatter. Random vectors, now. Our warning came just as the Void Hunger's forces suddenly collapsed inward, attempting to create a massive gravity well that would crush the Allied fleet. But the human captains, long trained in unpredictable maneuvers, were already moving. The Zinthar ships, traditionally bound by strict formation protocols, followed their lead in what appeared to be complete disorder. Pattern analysis confirms it. Resonant's voice hummed with excitement. The Void Hunger cannot predict our movements. It's trying to adapt, but the combination of human chaos and Zinthar precision is creating patterns too complex for it to process. Press the advantage, Nadia ordered. Ground teams, commence Operation Firefly. On the colony's surface, Isabella's mixed teams put their training to use. Human Marines used their seemingly primitive projectile weapons to herd the Void Hunger's ground forces into killing zones, where Zinthar warriors would phase into reality, their crystalline forms channeling energy weapons that shifted frequency faster than the enemy could adapt. Commander, keeper of ancient knowledge, materialized on the bridge, its form pulsing with urgent patterns. We're detecting a quantum surge from the enemy forces. They're attempting to merge into a single entity. Nadia smiled grimly, just as we predicted. Lieutenant Petel, signal the Zinthar fleet. Execute final phase. The Void Hunger's forces coalesced into a massive, writhing darkness that threatened to engulf the entire colony. But as it did, the human and Zinthar ships began a maneuver that defied conventional physics. The human vessels flew in seemingly random patterns, while Zinthar ships maintained perfect geometric formations, yet somehow, impossibly, they moved as one. The combined fleet's movements created a complex resonance pattern, amplified by the Zinthar's crystalline technology and guided by human intuition. The pattern rippled through space, creating a quantum interference wave that the Void Hunger couldn't adapt to because it never repeated exactly the same way twice. Energy readings are off the scale, Harrison reported. The enemy entity is destabilizing. All ships, full power to resonance generators, Nadia commanded. Show them what happens when order and chaos dance together. The Void Hunger's massive form began to break apart, unable to maintain cohesion in the face of an attack it couldn't predict or counter. Its remaining forces retreated in disarray, leaving behind only scattered shadows where its tendrils had once threatened to consume everything. As the all-clear signals began to sound throughout the fleet, Resonant turned to Nadia. This victory, it should not have been possible. Our tactical simulations gave us less than a 2% chance of success. That's the problem with your simulations, Nadia replied, allowing herself a small smile. They can only account for what you believe is possible. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our fighting spirit. It's our ability to imagine beyond the boundaries of what others think can be done. And yet, Harrison added, reviewing the battle data, we couldn't have done this without the Xinthar's abilities and precision. Either force alone would have failed. A lesson for both our peoples, Keeper observed. Perhaps the greatest defense against the impossible is to become impossible ourselves. Nadia nodded, but her expression remained serious as she studied the tactical display showing the Void Hunger's retreat. This was just a vanguard force. The main body is still coming, and it will have learned from this encounter. Then we will need to become even more impossible, Resonant declared, its crystalline form shimmering with newfound determination. Teach us, Commander Volkov. Teach us how to think beyond our limitations. First, Nadia replied, you need to teach us how to refine our chaos. Because next time we'll need more than just clever tricks. We'll need to become something entirely new, a force that combines the best of both our species. As the fleet regrouped and rescue operations began on the colony below, Nadia couldn't shake the feeling that this victory, impressive as it was, had only bought them time. The real test was still to come. The holograms flickered ominously in the Intrepid's war room, showing the massive void approaching the Sol system. After 3 brutal months of hit-and-run battles, the main body of the Void Hunger had finally arrived. It was larger than anyone had anticipated, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to devour the very starlight around it. The quantum scans are troubling, Keeper of Ancient Knowledge reported, its crystalline form dulled with concern. It's not just growing, it's evolving. The patterns we observe suggest it's developing countermeasures to our combined tactics. Nadia studied the tactical display, her face illuminated by the eerie glow of the holographic void. The combined human Xinthar fleet had won dozens of skirmishes using their unprecedented fusion of chaos and precision, but each victory had come at a devastating cost. Half their ships were lost, and the survivors bore scars that no technology could fully repair. "Show me the analysis of its adaptation rate," she commanded. Lieutenant Patel brought up a new series of diagrams. "It's learning exponentially. Each encounter increases its ability to predict and counter our movements. The chaos patterns that worked at Proxima are now barely effective. Then we need to evolve faster." Isabella Torres interjected from her position by the tactical table. The former sergeant now commanded the combined ground forces, her experience proving invaluable in teaching Xinthar warriors to think outside their rigid protocols. "We've barely scratched the surface of what our forces can do together." Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Harrison's voice cut through the chaos. "Multiple breaches detected. Something's coming through our phase shields." Dark tendrils materialized directly in the war room, moving with impossible speed. The Void Hunger had learned to mimic the Xinthar's phase-shifting ability, but with a horrifying twist. Anything it touched began to dissolve, converted into more of its own mass. "Evacuate." Nadia shouted, but resonant of distant waves moved faster. The Xinthar diplomat's crystalline form expanded, creating a barrier between the humans and the attacking tendrils. Where void met crystal, reality itself seemed to shudder. Go! Resonant's harmonic voice strained with effort. The ship's quantum core, it's what they want. Understanding dawned in Nydia's eyes. The quantum core contained the combined knowledge of both species, including all their tactical innovations. If the void hunger absorbed it. Taurus, get everyone to the emergency shuttles, she ordered, drawing her modified phase pistol. Harrison, initiate core purge protocols. Commander, Keeper's form pulsed with urgency. If we lose that core, we lose everything we've learned about fighting them. Better that than letting them learn how we think. Nadia replied grimly. She turned to Resonant, still holding back the void tendrils. Can you hold them? Not for long, the crystalline being's voice wavered. They're adapting to my resonance frequency, but I can buy you time. The next few minutes were chaos. As evacuation alarms blared throughout the ship, Nydia and Harrison fought their way to the quantum core, using everything they'd learned about combining human unpredictability with Zinthar precision. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of battle as more void tendrils breached the ship's defenses. They reached the core chamber to find it already under attack. 3 Zinthar warriors lay shattered, their crystalline forms dulled and lifeless. Dark tendrils writhed around the core itself, trying to penetrate its defenses. The purge controls are corrupted, Harrison reported, his cybernetic eye scanning rapidly. We'll have to overload it manually. That means no survivors, Nadia finished. She opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, this is Commander Volkov. Abandon ship. Get clear of the blast radius. She paused, then added, It's been an honor. But as she moved toward the core controls, a crystalline hand gripped her shoulder. Keeper of Ancient Knowledge stood there, its form shifting with complex patterns. You showed us how to think beyond our limitations, the ancient being said. Now let us show you what we've learned about human sacrifice. Before anyone could react, Keeper's form expanded, merging with the quantum core itself. My crystalline structure can contain the overload. Direct it. Keeper, no. Nydia started forward, but Harrison held her back. Get to the shuttle. Keeper's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. My people have lived for eons, bound by our own rules. Let my last act be one of beautiful chaos. The void tendrils sensed the building energy and began to retreat, but it was too late. Keeper's consciousness, merged with the quantum core, created a resonance cascade that defied physics itself. The combined knowledge of both species, instead of being destroyed, was transformed into a weapon of pure possibility. As Nadia and Harrison reached the last shuttle, they watched through the viewport as the Intrepid imploded. The quantum detonation created a ripple effect that shredded the void tendrils, turning their own adaptive nature against them. Where the blast touched the void humber's main body, it couldn't adapt fast enough to survive. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Not only was Keeper gone, but the quantum core containing their combined tactical database was destroyed. They would have to start over, finding new ways to combine their strengths. Hours later, aboard the Zinthar flagship, Nydia stood with Resonant, watching the Digris field where the Intrepid had been. Keeper's sacrifice bought us time, Resonant said softly, but the void hunger still comes. And now we must rebuild our alliance's strength without our tactical database. Nydia's expression was determined as she watched Earth glowing in the distance. Maybe that's exactly what we needed. We were beginning to rely too much on what worked before. Now we have to innovate again. She turned to the crystalline being. Your people learned to embrace chaos. Now it's time we learn to refine it. As if in response to her words, the void at the edge of the system pulsed ominously. The final battle was coming, and this time, they would have to do more than combine their strengths. They would have to transcend them entirely. The earth hung like a fragile blue marble against the backdrop of absolute darkness. The Void Hunter's main body had finally arrived, stretching across space like a cosmic wound. The combined fleet of human and Zinthar ships looked tiny in comparison, a last line of defense against the incomprehensible. Nadia stood on the bridge of the Zinthar flagship, Crystal Defiance, now transformed by human engineering into something entirely new. After Keeper's sacrifice, both species had worked frantically to evolve beyond their previous limitations. The result was a hybrid technology that seemed to defy the laws of physics themselves. "All ships report ready," Harrison's voice came through the crystalline communications array, now merged with his cybernetic systems. "The new quantum resonance fields are stable as controlled chaos can be anyway. The Void Hunter is scanning us," Isabella reported from her position, coordinating the ground forces on Earth. "Its patterns suggest confusion. It can't categorize what we've become." Nadia allowed herself a grim smile. After losing the tactical database, they'd been forced to innovate in ways neither species had imagined possible. Human ships now incorporated living crystal, while Zinthar vessels pulsed with unpredictable energy patterns. Their crews had learned to think as one while maintaining their unique perspectives. "Remember," she broadcast to the fleet, "we're not fighting this thing on its terms anymore. We're not just combining order and chaos. We're becoming something it can't comprehend." Resonant of distant waves, now permanently merged with the flagship's systems, manifested beside her. The void moves. It has chosen to attack. The battle that followed would be spoken of for generations, though no single account could capture its true nature. The Void Hunter struck with overwhelming force, its tendrils reaching across space like hungry shadows. But where before they had fought defensively, now the Allied fleet moved with impossible grace. Human intuition guided Zinthar precision in ways that created patterns within patterns. Ships phase shifted through void tendrils, while simultaneously firing weapons that combined crystalline energy with chaotic quantum fluctuations. The darkness tried to adapt, but each time it formed a countermeasure, the Allies had already shifted to something new. "It's working," Harrison called out. "The void can't maintain cohesion when it can't predict." His voice cut off as a massive tendril of darkness swept through the fleet's center, shattering ships and absorbing their mass. The Void Hunter had sacrificed part of itself to create an opening, demonstrating that it too could learn to embrace chaos. "All ships, execute Protocol Omega," Nadia commanded, her voice steady despite the losses. This was the moment they prepared for, the gambit that Keeper's sacrifice had made possible. The remaining ships began to move in a complex dance, their hybrid technologies creating a resonance field that seemed to twist space itself. The Zinthar had discovered that their crystalline forms could channel human consciousness, creating a temporary group mind that maintained individual creativity. Now they would attempt it on a scale never before imagined. "Resonance field at maximum," Resonant reported, its voice harmonizing with the ship's systems. "Beginning consciousness merge." Nadia felt it first as a whisper in her mind, then as a flood. Every human and Zinthar in the fleet connected, their thoughts and instincts flowing together while remaining distinctly themselves. Through this unified consciousness, they could coordinate with perfect precision while maintaining the unpredictability that made them so effective. The Void Hunter recoiled, sensing something it had never encountered in all its eons of consumption. The Allied fleet moved as one organism, Yet every action was unique and unexpected. Where it tried to predict patterns, it found infinite variation. Where it attempted to adapt, it found itself adapting to shadows. Now, Nadia's command rippled through the group consciousness. Every ship activated its hybrid core simultaneously, creating a cascading wave of possibility. The void tried to absorb it, but found itself trying to consume a force that refused to be defined. The darkness began to fold in on itself, its ability to adapt becoming its undoing. The more it tried to counter the Allies' impossible tactics, the more it tied itself in paradoxical knots. Its consciousness, vast but ultimately binary in its consumption patterns, couldn't process the existence of beings that were simultaneously ordered and chaotic. It's collapsing. Harrison's thoughts merged with the group consciousness. The quantum cascade is. The void exploded inward, its mass converting to energy in a blast that would have destroyed the fleet if not for their merged consciousness allowing perfect coordination of their defensive screens. When the light faded, only scattered particles remained where the cosmic horror had been. As the group consciousness gently dissolved, Nadia found herself back on the Crystal Defiance's bridge, breathing heavily. Around her, humans and Zinthar alike were processing what they'd just experienced, a moment of perfect unity that hadn't sacrificed their individual natures. "We did it." Resonant manifested beside her, its crystalline form glowing with new patterns. "But we've become something else in the process, something neither of our species could have imagined." Nadia walked to the viewport, watching Earth rotate peacefully below. "That's the real victory, isn't it? We didn't just defeat the void hunger. We proved that the impossible isn't about defying physics or breaking rules. It's about having the courage to become more than what we think we can be." Hours later, as celebration messages poured in from Earth and the surviving Zinthar worlds, Nadia stood in the ship's memorial chamber. A crystalline structure held the essence of Keeper of Ancient Knowledge, preserved in the moment of their sacrifice. Beside it, a traditional human plaque listed the names of all those lost in the conflict. "They're calling it the Legacy Protocol," Harrison said, joining her. "The ability to merge consciousness while maintaining individuality. Every ship in the fleet is being retrofitted with the technology." "Not just ships," Isabella added, her hologram flickering beside them. "The ground forces are already training with smaller-scale versions. The applications for peaceful purposes are endless." Nadia touched the crystal memorial gently. Keeper was right. The greatest defense against the impossible is to become impossible ourselves. Not by denying what we are, but by having the courage to become more. Through the viewport, stars twinkled with renewed brightness, as if celebrating the victory. But more than that, they seemed to beckon, inviting this new hybrid civilization to explore what else might be possible when order and chaos learned to dance together. So, Resonant's voice hummed through the ship's systems. "What impossible thing shall we attempt next?" Nadia smiled, feeling the gentle touch of the group consciousness at the edges of her mind, not controlling, but connecting. "That's the beauty of it," she replied. "We'll decide together." And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, the light of possibility burned brighter than ever before.